600 people in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos went completely still. Not because of the auction. Not because of the music. Not because of the celebrity speeches. It was because a little girl in a wheelchair, a child every doctor in the country had said would never stand unassisted, had just pushed herself to her feet, trembling and pale, and was walking slowly across the marble ballroom floor. Toward the man holding a mop. Not toward her billionaire mother. Not toward the celebrities. Not toward the cameras already swinging in her direction. Toward the janitor. And what happened next would break every single person in that room wide open. If stories like this one hit you somewhere you didn't expect, stick around, because this one is worth every minute. The chandelier above the Sovereign Ballroom in downtown Denver cast light the color of warm honey across 600 people who had each paid $25,000 for a seat. The evening was called Radiance, an annual charity gala hosted by Whitfield Capital, the investment firm built over 2 decades by Claire Whitfield, whose face had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times and who had, at 30, become one of the youngest self-made billionaires in American history. Tonight's event was meant to raise money for pediatric rehabilitation programs across the region. The irony of that, given what was about to happen, was lost on no one who witnessed it. Claire stood near the east wall, talking to no one in particular, holding a glass of sparkling water she hadn't touched in 40 minutes. Her navy gown had cost more than most people's mortgage payments, and her hair was pinned in a style that looked effortless and had taken 90 minutes. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman completely in control of the room. She was not in control of anything. Across the ballroom, at a small round table near the service entrance, sat Nora Whitfield, 8 years old, dark eyes, her father's cheekbones, her mother's stubborn jaw in the motorized wheelchair she'd used for 3 years, ever since the accident. Nobody in Claire's circle called it that out loud. They called it the incident, or Nora's situation. Anything but the actual word, because the actual word meant accepting what the doctors had said. That the nerve damage along Nora's lower spine was significant enough that independent standing was unlikely, and independent walking, in the opinion of 4 separate specialists, was not a realistic goal. Nora didn't know her mother cried in the car after those appointments. Claire had made sure of that. Nora had wheeled herself to the table by the service entrance after an hour of being introduced to adults who smiled too wide and talked to her in slow, exaggerated voices, the way people sometimes talk to children they pity. She hated it, though she'd never said so, because her mother had worn that stretched, tired look all night, the one that meant Claire was working hard not to fall apart, and Nora had learned, sometime in the last 3 years, to read that look and go quiet. So she sat by the service entrance, watching the dancers, and that was where she first noticed the janitor. His name was Daniel Hart, though at the time Nora didn't know that. Tall, though not dramatically so, the kind of tall that takes up space without trying. He wore the hotel's white uniform shirt and gray trousers, working a wide mop across the far edge of the marble floor near the corridor to the kitchen, moving with the economy of someone whose body had long since memorized the mechanics of physical work. His face wasn't the kind that drew attention, not plain, exactly, but quiet, like a man who'd decided at some point to stop being noticed. He was 37. He had a son at home, 6-year-old Sam, being watched that night by the neighbor across the hall, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Alanas, who always tucked a $20 bill into Sam's pocket in case Daniel needed extra time. Daniel had told her she didn't have to. She'd told him, very directly, to stop arguing with her. Daniel had worked at the Sovereign for 14 months. Before that, a hotel in Columbus. Before that, one in Cleveland. He moved every year or so. Not because he was ever fired, he never was, he was reliable in the particular way that comes from military training and personal discipline, but because staying in one place too long made him uncomfortable. Sam had adapted to this without complaint, which was either a good sign or a sign that Daniel had already taught his 6-year-old to expect impermanence, and Daniel tried not to think too hard about which one it was. Nobody at the Sovereign knew what Daniel had done before the hotels. He'd filled out the application honestly, service roles since 2019, and before that, 12 years of military service, but he hadn't elaborated, and nobody had pushed. The hotel's practical, floor-obsessed manager, a man named Frank, had looked at Daniel's references, seen the word exceptional twice and irreplaceable once, and hired him on the spot. Daniel had mopped floors in 3 states and learned that most people never really look at the person holding the mop. He decided that was fine. He decided it was, in fact, exactly what he needed. He was working near the service corridor when he felt someone watching him. He looked up. The little girl in the wheelchair was staring at him with the direct, unself-conscious intensity that only very young children and very old people ever manage. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching him the way you watch something you're trying to figure out. He gave her a small nod, plain acknowledgement, nothing more. And went back to work. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she was the host's daughter. He didn't know what she supposedly couldn't do. He just kept mopping. Nora watched him for 11 minutes, more or less. She watched how he moved, calm and unhurried, unbothered that 600 people in expensive clothes were 20 feet away. She watched him correct his path around an obstacle without missing a beat. And then she watched something she hadn't expected. He stopped, briefly, and looked at the dancers, not with envy, not with irritation, but with an expression she couldn't quite name, like he was remembering something. Then he looked away and went back to work. She made her decision the way 8-year-olds make decisions, completely, and without waiting to think it all the way through. The sensation started low in her back, not quite pain, the strange electric buzz she sometimes felt when pushing at her limits. Her physical therapist, a careful woman named Dr. Alvarez, called it neuromuscular feedback and had told her to notice it, not chase it. Her mother had repeated those words to her more than once. Nora gripped the armrests of her chair. The buzzing spread through her hips. She pushed. Nobody in that ballroom, just by watching, could have understood the sheer mechanical demand of it. What looked from the outside like a small girl standing up was, from the inside, like forcing open a door that had been locked for 3 years and might still be locked, and might break her if she pushed it wrong. Her legs shook. Her arms shook. The table beside her rattled hard enough that a half-full glass of water tipped and would have shattered on the floor if a passing server hadn't caught it mid-stride without breaking pace. Nora stood. Not fully upright, leaning, one hand braced on the table, her legs visibly trembling, her balance nowhere near certain. But she was up. Her feet were on the floor. She was standing in a room that was about to understand exactly what it was looking at. A woman at the next table stopped mid-sentence. Then the man beside her. Silence spread through the crowd the way it does, not announced, just felt rippling outward from Nora's corner. Claire heard the quiet before she understood it. She turned. Her daughter was standing. The glass in Claire's hand would have hit the floor if a server hadn't caught it at her elbow, and she didn't even notice, because she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch her 8-year-old. The daughter 4 specialists had cautioned her not to expect too much from, take one trembling step, then another. Don't fall. Please don't fall. Claire thought it so hard it was nearly sound. She didn't move forward. She stood frozen, terrified that if she crossed the room, if she made this about her own reaction instead of about Nora's choice, something would break. Nora wasn't looking at her. That was the part that would stay with Claire for months. Her daughter was crossing a room full of people just beginning to grasp what they were witnessing, and she wasn't looking at any of them, not her mother, not the celebrities, not the cameras already turning. She was looking at the janitor. Daniel had his back to the room, working the far edge of the marble near the corridor exit. The sound of the ballroom had shifted to quieter, heavier, but he'd worked enough events to know crowds go silent for a dozen reasons that are none of his business. He kept moving. Excuse me. The voice was small, slightly out of breath. He turned. The girl from the corner table stood 3 feet behind him, leaning, off balance, her legs shaking hard enough that he could see it from where he stood, her face the color of someone doing something very physically demanding and refusing to admit it hurt. She was standing without the chair. Something in Daniel's training recognized it before the rest of him did, the trembling of real effort, real limit, real risk of collapse. And he went still in the practiced way of someone who knows the wrong movement can be worse than none at all. He looked at her, steady, not alarmed. I heard you, he said. She took a breath. Will you dance with me, please? The ballroom behind her had gone completely silent. Daniel didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the girl, the shaking legs, the locked jaw, the absolute determination in her dark eyes. And made a calculation that had nothing to do with the cameras, or the crowd, or the billionaire frozen 30 feet away. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." He set the mop handle quietly against the wall, walked toward her without hurrying, and crouched slightly so they were closer to eye level. He held out both hands, not to catch her, not to support her weight, just to offer them. "You pick the pace," he said quietly. "We go as slow as you need." She put her hands in his. What happened over the next 4 minutes wasn't choreographed. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't the kind of dancing that belonged at a $25,000 a seat gala. Nora shuffled more than she stepped. Her balance failed twice. Once badly enough that Daniel took her weight without being asked and held it until she found her feet again, absorbing her stumble the way a wall absorbs a lean, without commentary, without turning it into a moment, then handing her back to herself when she was ready. He moved at whatever speed she moved at. He didn't lead. He didn't perform. The only thing he did that wasn't purely functional came at the point when her face went tight with effort and something close to shame, when she looked like she was about to apologize. He said, just loud enough for her to hear, "You're doing it." Not "you can." Not "you're almost there." Present tense. Already real. Her expression changed. The ballroom erupted, not gradually, all at once, the way 600 people break when they've been holding their breath too long. Applause, and underneath it, something closer to a roar, the sound of people who didn't expect to be moved and can't help themselves. Claire put a hand over her mouth. She was shaking, watching her daughter stand in the middle of the marble floor holding the hands of a janitor she'd never met, crying with an expression that looked less like sadness and more like something sealed shut for years finally cracking open. Daniel heard the applause the way you hear weather from inside. Present, but distant, someone else's concern. His attention stayed on Nora. She looked up at him. "I did it." "You did," he said. "My legs hurt." "Yeah. They're going to." He said it like the most straightforward thing in the world. "Want to sit down?" She thought about it with the deliberateness of a child who's just done something enormous and isn't ready to let it end. "1 more minute." "Okay," he said. So they stood there 1 more minute in the middle of the ballroom while 600 people applauded and cameras recorded, and Claire Whitfield stood at the edge of it all, watching a stranger hold her daughter's hands with more steadiness than she felt capable of herself. Then Nora sat, and Daniel picked his mop back up. The applause was still going when he wheeled her back to her table, no production made of it. He simply retrieved the chair, brought it to where she stood, still holding her own weight but visibly running low on reserve, and positioned it behind her without a word. By morning, the video was everywhere. Claire tracked down Daniel's number through Frank the manager, gave him her direct line, and asked that the message be passed along that it wasn't about the video. Daniel called back at 9:17, which told her something. That he wasn't a man who waited to see if a problem dissolved on its own. "Ms. Whitfield." "Mr. Hart. Thank you for calling back." She'd planned what to say, and now it sat awkwardly in her mind, because the directness of his voice made formality feel like a costume. I owe Nora an apology for the attention this video is going to bring you. I'm sorry about that." A short silence. "She's okay with it. You talked to her before I left last night." She was awake. Claire hadn't known that. It landed somewhere uncomfortable. Her 8-year-old had talked to the janitor before the car ride home, and nobody had told her. "She's a good kid," Daniel said. "She is." Claire reset herself. "Mr. Hart, I'd like to offer you a position. A private contract, working directly with Nora on her physical rehabilitation. The rate would be significant, and you'd have full control over the approach. We'd provide the space, whatever equipment you need." "I appreciate that," Daniel said. But no. She'd expected hesitation. She hadn't expected the answer to arrive already formed. Could I ask why? Because I'm not a therapist. I'm a janitor who danced with your daughter. Those are different things. What I did last night was take her hands and let her lead. That's not a skill set you hire. That's just not making it about yourself. He said it without apology, like something obvious. She doesn't need a coach she has to perform for. She's been performing for adults her whole life. The sentence hit Claire somewhere she wasn't ready for. She was quiet a moment. Then what does she need, she asked, genuinely, without the edge she usually brought to questions she expected wrong answers to. Daniel was quiet a beat. She needs other kids. Kids in the same situation, where falling down is just something that happens, not something everyone holds their breath about. He gave her the details: Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 10 to noon, a free community program at the Riverside Community Center, kids with all kinds of mobility limitations. No cameras. No contracts. No performance. Claire looked out at the Denver skyline through her penthouse window. I'll look into it. You can look into it, Daniel said. Or she can just show up. No challenge in it, just a statement. And the distance between those two things was the whole distance between Claire's instinct to vet and control everything, and whatever it was Daniel Hart operated by. She felt that distance clearly. Thank you for your time, she said. Sure. A pause. She did a hard thing last night. You should tell her that. He hung up. Claire sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. She didn't send Nora to Riverside right away. Instead, she investigated funding sources, staff credentials, safety records, liability coverage, and called the program's director, a woman named Renee Foster, who'd run adaptive movement programs for 11 years and answered Claire's 14 detailed questions with the patience of someone who'd dealt with anxious wealthy parents before and had long since stopped taking it personally. The program checked out completely, in the way things with nothing to hide tend to, which somehow unsettled Claire more than it reassured her, because she was used to finding something to negotiate. She didn't tell Nora about the call. She did tell her, over dinner, that she was proud of her. Nora looked up from her pasta, and her expression wasn't the grateful, luminous thing Claire had imagined. It was more complicated. Proud of me for what? For what you did last night. Standing up. Walking across the room. Nora twirled pasta around her fork, a delaying tactic Claire had learned to recognize. The man, Daniel, he said I did a hard thing. He told me that, too. You talked to him this morning? I offered him a job. What kind of job? Working with you on your physical therapy. Nora was quiet. Did he say yes? He said no. Something shifted in Nora's face, not quite surprise, not quite satisfaction, somewhere between. Why? He said you needed something different than a private coach. Claire set down her fork. Other kids. Nora looked at her pasta. There's a program, Claire said. At a recreation center nearby. 4 kids with challenges similar to yours. Movement classes. He mentioned it. Is he there? I don't know, Claire said, which was true she hadn't asked. Nora chewed carefully. Then, can I go? Claire had 14 reasons ready. Logistics, the ongoing media attention, Nora's existing therapy plan, and opened her mouth to begin working through them. Then she stopped. She's been performing for adults her whole life. I'll look at the schedule, she said. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't the padded no she usually produced when she was afraid of something, and Nora heard the difference. She nodded once and went back to her pasta. Nora attended her first Tuesday session at Riverside 11 days after the gala. Claire didn't go inside, that was the negotiation. Nora agreed to let the driver bring her, Claire agreed not to come in. She sat in the car in the lot for the full 2 hours, laptop open and mostly ignored, watching the door. According to what Nora reported afterward, more than Claire expected, since Nora was usually sparing about her day, there were 9 other kids, 6 to 12 years old. A boy named Malik with a prosthetic leg who kept doing wheelies when the instructor wasn't watching. A girl named Ellie with cerebral palsy and a laugh that Nora said made you start laughing even when nothing was funny. An instructor named Renee who corrected your form in the same flat, matter-of-fact tone she used to say good morning. Nora had fallen twice, and she reported it with the precision of someone filing an incident report. Once reaching for a rail that was farther than she'd estimated, once for no clear reason, which she said was annoying. Did anyone make a big deal of it? Claire asked. Malik said nice one the second time. Was he being mean? No, Nora said, in the tone she used when she found her mother's interpretations exhausting. He says it to everyone when they fall. Like it's just normal. Did you like it? Nora looked out the window. Ellie invited me to sit with her group for the cool-down. She just came over and said there was space. I didn't know anyone. That was kind. She doesn't do it to be kind, Nora said. She just does it. Can I go Thursday? Yes, Claire said, no pause this time. Daniel hadn't expected to see Nora Whitfield again. He'd assumed the phone call with her mother was the end of the whole strange, brief intersection with a world that wasn't his. He'd gone back to his shifts. He'd helped Sam with a school project on weather systems. He'd fixed the leaking bathroom faucet the building super had promised to handle for 3 weeks and clearly wasn't going to. He'd returned, in other words, completely to the life he'd built from what was left. So when he walked into Riverside on a Tuesday morning with Sam in tow, Sam had a dentist appointment at noon, which meant Daniel was covering Renee's session as a favor while her usual assistant was out sick. He wasn't prepared to see the girl from the ballroom. Nora was at the balance rail, talking to a girl with a bright red hair clip. She saw Daniel at almost the same moment he saw her. She didn't wave or call out, just looked at him with the same direct, unself-conscious expression she'd had at the gala, registering his presence without performance, then turned back to her conversation. Sam, who was 6 and had no filter between thought and mouth, said, "Dad, that kid was in the video." "I know. She's here." "It's not my work," Daniel said. "I'm just helping today." Sam considered the distinction and decided it wasn't worth arguing. "She's pretty." "Don't tell her that," Daniel said. "Go sit where you're not in the way." Sam went to the bleachers and pulled out the small notebook he carried everywhere, working on what he called a graphic novel, recording ideas as they occurred to him, which was constantly. Daniel ran the session's rhythm without incident. Warm-up, balance work, paired exercises Renee built around the theory that helping each other was part of the therapy itself. He got to Nora at the balance rail near the end. Her form was reasonable, but she was locking her right knee on the transfer, which would cause problems if it became a habit. "Don't lock it," he said. She looked at him. "What?" "Right knee. Bend it slightly when you transfer." She tried it. The movement smoothed out immediately, and she looked faintly annoyed that it had worked so easily. "How'd you know that?" "Because I do the same thing." He didn't elaborate, the full answer being that he'd been through rehab himself, twice, and the knee lock was an old reflex from favoring damage he didn't talk about. More than she needed to know. She took a few more steps, steadier than she'd been at the gala. Not dramatically, but the kind of incremental progress that never photographs well and means everything anyway. "My mom offered you a job," she said, not looking up. "Yeah." "You said no." "Yeah." "Was it the money?" He almost smiled. "It wasn't the money." "Was it because you didn't want to work for her?" "No," he said honestly. "Your mom seems like a serious person." "That's not a bad thing." Nora took another step. "She's scared all the time." "She doesn't show it, but I can tell. She was scared last night, too. At the gala. I could see it." "I know," Daniel said. She looked up at him. "You knew she was scared?" When you care about someone that much and they do something unexpected, it's going to look like fear from the outside. That's just how it works. Nora thought about that. She didn't run across the room. "No," Daniel said. "She didn't. I thought she would." I thought she'd come running and grab me and make me sit down. But she just watched. He didn't say anything to that. She didn't need his commentary, she was working something through on her own terms. She took 3 more steps, reached the end of the rail, and stopped, her shoulders dropping with fatigue. "Good session," he said, not encouragement, a report. She accepted it as such. "Thanks for the knee thing." "Sure." That afternoon, sitting in the dentist's waiting room watching Sam through the exam room window, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Claire Whitfield. Renee Foster gave me your number. I want to apologize for overstepping with the contract offer. I shouldn't have led with money." He read it twice. "No offense taken," he wrote back. A pause with typing and deleting in it. Then, "Nora came home different today. I don't have a better word for it." He thought about her at the rail, the knee correction, the unguarded way she'd worked through her thought about her mother watching from across the room. Different how? Less braced, Claire wrote. Like she'd put something down. He understood. He'd seen it before, not often, but enough, the moment someone stops carrying something they'd carried so long they forgot it wasn't part of them. "She's going to fall a lot," he wrote. "The program works because falling is normalized." That part might be hard to watch. A longer pause. "I know. I'm working on that." He appreciated that she didn't dress it up. Another text came through. She asked if you'd be there Thursday. Within a week, someone had connected the dots. The janitor who danced with a billionaire's daughter was a decorated Navy SEAL. The headlines came with all the usual variations. Some added hero, some added mystery. One aggressive tabloid ran secret soldier in a font built for suspicion, not admiration. The story had everything: the gala video, the emotional core of Nora's arc, and now Daniel's background, which recontextualized the whole thing without changing a single fact of what had happened. Daniel found out about the piece written by a reporter named Nadia Cross the same way he found out about the view count. Someone told him. It was Claire, calling at 7:45 Friday morning while he made Sam's breakfast. "Have you seen it?" she asked without preamble. "No." He wedged the phone against his shoulder, slid Sam's eggs onto a plate, pointed at it. Sam, mid-sentence about his graphic novel, understood the signal and started eating. Daniel stepped into the hallway. "Okay. What is it?" She told him precisely what the article said, what it sourced, what it got right, what it got wrong or left incomplete. When she finished, a pause. "The part about why you left. It says it's unknown. That you separated voluntarily, but there's a redacted notation." "That's accurate. You don't have to tell me." "I know," Daniel said. Another pause. He could hear her deciding whether to push and deciding not to. He appreciated that. "The board called me at 6 this morning," she said. 3 of them. About the reputational adjacency, they called it. Corporate language for being worried without saying what they're actually worried about, which is that a woman in my position is spending time with an unknown quantity. That I don't know enough about you to be making decisions about access to my family. Flat, no inflection. Daniel leaned against the hallway wall, listening to Sam eat his eggs with the systematic efficiency of a kid with somewhere to be. "What did you tell them?" "That I'd look into it." Which is what I say when I have no intention of doing what they're suggesting but need them to feel heard so I can end the meeting. That's pretty sharp. "I run a multi-billion-dollar company," she said, matter of fact, no boast in it. "I've been managing boards since I was 26. I know the difference between someone protecting the company and someone protecting their own comfort and dressing it up as the former. I also know the difference between an unknown quantity and a person who just hasn't been asked the right questions yet." "And which am I?" "I think you know." She didn't answer it directly. "The media attention's going to hit the rec center. If it hasn't already," he said. "Renee should know. I called her last night. She's prepared. No cameras inside." "Good. Nora knows about the article. She saw it on my tablet this morning before I could stop her." She's faster than I give her credit for. A pause. She asked me if it would make you leave. Something moved through Daniel's chest, not quite pain, in that neighborhood. What did you tell her? That I didn't know. That it was your decision. I won't lie to her to manage her feelings. I've tried that before, it doesn't work, and it isn't fair to her. She asked you to call me? She asked me to find out. Daniel pushed off the wall, walked back toward the kitchen. Sam had finished his eggs and was already drawing, which meant he'd eaten fast on purpose to get to it, filed away for later. Tell her I'll be at Thursday's session. Same as always. A short silence. She'll want to hear it from you directly. Figured. Can she call? Yes. I'll have her call from my phone. Softer this time, thank you, Daniel. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know, Claire said. I've had practice with worse. He didn't doubt it. Nora called at 8:15, right as Daniel was clearing the breakfast dishes. It said you were a soldier, she said, no hello. I was a Navy SEAL. Yeah, I looked it up. It said it's one of the hardest trainings in the world. It said most people quit. That's true. Did you ever want to quit? He considered lying. It would have been easy, forgivable. She was 8, but her directness made dishonesty feel like an insult. First week. Yeah. Once. But you didn't. No. Why not? He gave her the real answer, not the practiced one. I looked at the guy next to me, and he looked like he wanted to quit too, and I thought if he can stay, I can stay. And I figured he was probably thinking the same thing about me. Silence on her end while she processed, thoroughly, the way she processed everything. So you stayed because of him. We both stayed because of each other. Neither of us said it out loud. We just both kept going. Was he your friend? Yeah. He was. He didn't say what happened to that friend later, and Nora, whatever she read in his voice, didn't ask. The article said there's a part they couldn't find out, she said. About why you stopped. Yeah. You don't have to tell me, she added quickly, with the exact cadence Claire had used an hour earlier, a mother's phrasing, absorbed and reproduced by her daughter, ordinary and quietly devastating at once. I know, Daniel said. I'll tell you someday when you're older. People say that and then don't. I will. I'm not big on saying things I don't mean. A pause. Are you going to leave because of the article? No. Are you sure? Nora. He said her name the way he said Sam's when he needed his son to listen past his own worry. I told your mom I'd be at Thursday's session. I don't change plans because other people write things about me. A quiet that felt like relief settling. Okay. Okay. Sam said I was pretty, she said suddenly. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. He said it at the rec center. He's 6. He says everything he thinks. I know, Nora said, sounding amused rather than bothered. I think it's kind of nice, actually. Most people think stuff and then decide not to say it. Most people learn pretty fast that saying everything you think causes problems. I guess. He's funny. He was drawing in that notebook the whole time. He's working on a graphic novel. What's it about? I'm not entirely sure, Daniel admitted. He explains it differently every time I ask. Nora laughed, a real one, short and unguarded. Thursday, Daniel said. Thursday, she confirmed, and hung up. Reporters showed up at Riverside on Monday, not inside. Renee had made clear no camera crew was entering her building. But outside in the lot and across the street, with portable setups and the particular patient focus of people paid to wait as long as it takes. Daniel had expected it. The pattern was always the same once a story had enough elements. He came in through the service entrance Thursday, a code Renee had texted him the night before with the message, use the back. 6 of them out front since 8. Claire and Nora arrived the same way, the the car pulling into the alley. Daniel watched from the corridor window, the car stopping, the door opening, Nora transferring herself into the chair with the efficient, self-directed sequence she'd been getting steadily better at. Claire got out too, standing beside the car and what Daniel was starting to recognize as her armor, dark blazer, minimal jewelry. He pushed open the service door. "You can wait inside," he said. Renee set up a parents' area near the gym. Something moved across Claire's face. Not quite surprise, the particular expression of someone who's been managing everything alone for so long that an unexpected small kindness lands strangely. "Thank you. The press out front is going to want a comment eventually," he said, holding the door. "You'll want to have thought about what it is." "I have. I'm not giving them one." "That's a comment too. Just the kind made by not showing up." She looked at him sideways as she walked past into the corridor, Nora already rolling ahead. "You've dealt with this before. Different version of it." She didn't press. They walked toward the gym, Nora pulling ahead with her usual focused momentum, and Daniel found himself beside Claire in the narrow hallway, aware of the deliberate way she held her composure, not natural, but put on each morning and checked throughout the day. "How long have you been this prepared for everything?" he asked. "Since I was about 22. She glanced at him. "My father's company went under. Publicly, badly. We lost most of what we had in about 4 months." She said it with the flatness of an old story handled so many times it had no edges left. "I finished my degree that year, started working, decided the only future I could tolerate was one where I controlled as many variables as possible." "And the ones you can't control?" "I'm working on those." He almost said something about how the variables you can't control are usually the ones that matter most, but the gym door was ahead of them, and the moment passed. The session ran its usual organized chaos, kids falling and getting up, arguing about technique, helping each other with an ease adults rarely manage, because adults remember too well the cost of asking for help. Nora worked the parallel bars beside a girl named Zara, who had juvenile arthritis and moved with the careful math of someone always calculating what a movement would cost her. They'd been paired before and had developed the easy shorthand of kids who found each other's pace without needing to discuss it. Daniel moved through the room, watching form, catching the subtle shifts that precede a fall, saying the necessary thing in the fewest possible words. He was aware of Claire in the parents' area, seated. He hadn't been sure she would sit, watching not just Nora but the whole room, reading it the way people trained to read rooms can't quite stop doing even when they've promised themselves they're only there to observe. Nora fell at the 40-minute mark. Left side, the weaker one, her foot sliding on the turn from the bar, her weight shifting wrong before she could correct it. She went down onto the mat. Thick enough to absorb it, but still a fall. Daniel was 4 feet away and didn't move toward her. He watched to be sure she hadn't hit her head. She hadn't. He watched her hands catch her, watched her stay there a second, breathing. From the parents' area, he heard Claire's chair scrape. He turned. She was halfway out of her seat. Their eyes met. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, not dismissive, just wait. She looked at him for a long moment, caught between every instinct she had and the part of her learning which instincts helped and which didn't, and sat back down, hands in her lap, held still by force of will. He could see the effort of it. Nora pushed herself upright, looked at her legs, said something to Zara, who'd crouched beside her. Zara said something back. Nora made a face that wasn't quite a laugh but stood near one. Then she reached for the bar and began the process of getting up, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which Daniel had learned to let take as long as it needed. Once she was back on her feet, resetting her stance, she looked toward the parents' area and found her mother. She saw that Claire hadn't moved. Something shifted in Nora's face, not the relief Claire might have hoped for, not thank you for trusting me, something quieter. The beginning of understanding that the people who love you most aren't always the ones who come running, and that restraint can be its own form of faith. She turned back to the bar. By the following Monday the cameras outside Riverside were gone. Not because the story had died, but because something bigger had broken in the news cycle over the weekend, and the janitor seal billionaire narrative got deprioritized the way every human story eventually does when the machine decides something else is more urgent. Daniel noticed their absence without much feeling about it, the way you notice a low-grade noise stop. What didn't go away was the internet. Nadia Cross's piece had spawned its own ecosystem, think pieces, comment threads, reaction videos, arguments that had less to do with what actually happened at the gala than with what people had decided it meant. Some of it was generous. A lot of it wasn't. The accusation that gained the most traction, because it had the cleanest narrative shape, was that Daniel Hart was running a long game. That a man with his background didn't end up dancing with a billionaire's daughter by accident, that the modesty and the refused interviews and the declined contract were all calculated moves toward a financial endgame. The smarter the con, the slower it runs, someone wrote in a thread that collected 40,000 likes. And this one is running very slow and very smart. Daniel read it on his phone one Tuesday morning while Sam ate breakfast, set the phone face down, and finished making coffee. Sam looked at him. 6 years old, and already able to read the particular quality of his father's stillness. What happened? Nothing. Eat? Your face does the thing. What thing? The flat thing. When you're mad but you're not going to say you're mad. I'm not mad. Okay, Sam said, in the tone he used when he'd decided not to argue but hadn't been convinced, and went back to his cereal. Is it about Nora's mom? Why would it be about her? Sam shrugged with elaborate casualness. You talk on the phone after you think I'm asleep. You talk different when it's her. Daniel stood at the counter and did not examine that statement as closely as he could have. Finish eating. You've got school. Claire had read the same threads. The mistake of reading them at midnight in bed, the worst possible time and place for anything requiring a clear head. Her first instinct had been the one 12 years of corporate life had trained into her: assess, respond, neutralize, call her PR firm, get ahead of it. She sat up until 1 in the morning drafting a statement in her head, and by 1:15 had decided not to release it. Not for strategic reasons simpler than that. She knew the accusations were wrong, not because she'd had him investigated, she hadn't, and was uncomfortably aware of what that said about the last 3 months, but because she'd spent enough of her life reading people whose motives needed watching to know the difference between calculation and character. Daniel Hart was many things. Calculated wasn't one of them. She called him at 7:30 before her first meeting. I've seen the threads, she said when he picked up. I want to release a statement about my family's relationship with you, that you've never asked for anything, that you declined compensation, that everything between our families has been. She stopped. I'm not doing it without your agreement. A pause on his end. Don't. Daniel. A statement from you just confirms the story needs managing. Right now it's internet noise. You respond, it becomes a thing your PR firm responded to. That's worse. She was quiet. And the people who think you're running a con? People who know me know better. People who don't are going to believe whatever they want no matter what's in a statement. I've dealt with people deciding what I am before. I'll deal with it again. It bothers me. On your behalf. I know it does. A not unfriendly pause. That's a decent impulse. It's not your fight, though. It feels like my fight, Claire. He said her name the way he sometimes did. No wait, no agenda, just direct contact. The people saying those things don't know me. They don't know you. They built their version of this out of a 30-second video and a 5-paragraph article. Their version of me isn't me. Fighting it just gives it oxygen. She looked out the window at the gray Denver sky, clouds sitting low on the taller buildings. How do you do that? Not fight it? Practice. And a reasonably accurate sense of what actually matters. What actually matters? Nora. Sam. The sessions. What's real? She was quiet, watching a thin bar of early light catch the glass of the building across from hers. I've been thinking about coming to the sessions, she said. Not just sitting in the parents' area. Actually participating. A beat. There's an adult adaptive class on Friday mornings. Renee runs it. I don't have a mobility limitation. You don't need one, Daniel said. Renee takes people working on something. Balance, strength, discipline. She'd let you in. A pause. Question is what you're working on. She showed up Friday at 9:58. Renee Foster was 61, 5'2", and moved like someone who had decided decades ago that the right response to the world's difficulty was to move through it faster. She'd run adaptive movement programs since she was 30, first as a physical therapist, then as the founder of Riverside, which she'd built from a rented gymnasium and a grant she'd written herself at her kitchen table. She looked at Claire Whitfield for about 4 seconds and said, "Comfortable shoes." Claire looked down. "Flat rubber soles." "Yes." "Good. We start on the floor. Floor work, core, balance, foundation. The floor tells you things standing hides." Renee was already walking to the center of the room. You won't be good at it the first day. That's the point. Claire wasn't good at it the first day. She was, in the specific way of someone who'd been physically competent her whole life without ever being seriously challenged, worse than she'd expected. The exercises weren't complicated, but they demanded a quality of attention to her own body she wasn't used to giving. A listening, Renee called it, without any self-consciousness about the word. Claire kept anticipating movement instead of following it, kept reaching for control at the exact moment the exercise required releasing it. She didn't fall, but came close 3 times. The third time, Renee said, without breaking rhythm, "Stop catching yourself. I almost went over." Yes. Let it happen. The mat's there. Fall on the mat. Renee looked at her with the patience of someone who'd explained this 1,000 times and never stopped believing it. The catch reflex is the enemy. It fires before you know what's happening, and it locks you out of information your body was about to give you. Let go. Find the floor. Then you know where you actually are. Claire looked at the mat and let go. She went down sideways, not badly, landing on her forearm, rolling with it, not graceful, not damaging. And lay there a second on her side, looking at the fluorescent lights. "Now," Renee said, crouching beside her. "Where are you?" Claire took the question more seriously than it seemed to require. Her shoulder registered mild impact. Her hip had taken a small knock. Her breathing was slightly elevated. She was aware of the mat under her, its texture, its give in a way she hadn't been from standing. "On the floor," she said. "Right. On the floor. And you're fine. Now get up." She got up. By the end of the hour she'd fallen twice more, gotten up twice more, and the getting up had gotten fractionally easier each time, not because she'd gotten stronger in an hour, but because the anticipation of it had gotten less catastrophic. The falling was just falling. The floor was just the floor. Afterward, sitting on a bench stretching her calves, Renee handed her a water bottle. "You coming back?" "Yes." "You're going to be bad at it for a while." "I know." Renee nodded, satisfied. "Your daughter's improving," she said, not as a non sequitur. "I know it's the sessions. The other kids. That's part of it." Renee drank from her bottle. "Bigger part is she stopped waiting for permission to fail. She doesn't check the room before she tries something anymore. She just tries it." A pause. Kids catch that from adults, mostly. The waiting for permission thing. They watch the people they love and they learn. Is failure something we talk about, or something we hide? Claire was quiet. "You didn't fall in front of her," Renee said, not an accusation. "You managed everything." She could see the managing. Kids can always see the managing, even when they can't name it. She set down her water. "When you fall in the Friday class, and come back next week, and fall again, and keep showing up anyway, she's going to know that, even if you never tell her." "You think she needs to see me fail?" I think she needs to see that failing doesn't end things. Renee stood. You did good today, for someone who clearly hates not being good at things. Is it that obvious? Oh, very, Renee said pleasantly, and walked away. Daniel was at the Thursday session when Claire showed up for the first time, not as an observer. She'd texted him the day before, not quite asking permission, more the way she'd started communicating things to him, a fact with a question mark attached. Thinking about joining the Thursday parent group, Renee mentioned. Is that strange? No, he'd written back. Come. The parent group was a loose arrangement. 4 or 5 parents Renee had gradually coaxed off the observation benches into a gentle parallel movement session on the far side of the gym, low intensity, more stretching and breathing than anything demanding. Most were there because watching their kids struggle without being allowed to intervene was physically stressful in a way that needed somewhere to go, and Renee had recognized that with the same practical intelligence she brought to everything else. Claire joined without announcement and did what she was told. Daniel worked that session with Nora and Sam, which had become its own arrangement over the weeks. Sam had come to Thursdays 3 times now, ostensibly to show Nora pages from his graphic novel and be shown balance work in return, and what had actually developed was something harder to define, the sideways friendship that happens between kids of different ages when neither has many friends and both are unusual in ways that make them interesting to each other. Sam was explaining his main character, a boy who could slow down time, but only when he was completely calm. How does he get calm when something scary is happening? Nora asked, with her characteristic directness. One December evening, after the session, after the alley, after Claire's car had pulled away with Nora already asleep in the back, Daniel and Sam walked to their own car 2 blocks over. It was properly cold, the Denver kind with weight to it. Sam had his hood up, hands in his pockets, and they walked in the easy silence they had together when neither needed to fill it. Do you like Nora's mom? Sam asked. Daniel looked at the sidewalk ahead. Yeah. She's a good person. Like a friend. Something like that. Sam was quiet half a block, his breath making small clouds. Mom would want you to have a friend. He said it the way he said most things, simply, a fact he understood to be true, without loading it with more than it could hold. Daniel looked at his son. Sam kept his eyes on the sidewalk, navigating the cold pavement. Yeah, Daniel said. She would. They drove home without talking, and somewhere between the parking structure and the front door, Daniel accepted, quietly, that the thing he'd been refusing to look at directly wasn't going to disappear just because he kept not looking at it. He put Sam to bed, sat in the kitchen with coffee and his phone, and didn't text Claire. It was 10 at night, he wasn't ready, some things need to arrive in their own time. But he didn't put the phone away either. It sat on the table until 11:14, when he finally picked it up and wrote one line. Sam said something tonight I'd been thinking about. He set it down, picked it back up, and sent it before he could rewrite it into something more careful. The reply came 4 minutes later. She was still awake, which he'd suspected. What did he say? He thought about how to write it and decided the honest version was the only one worth sending. He said his mom would want me to have a friend. Said it like a fact he was reporting. A longer pause. 6-year-olds see things, she wrote. Then, after another pause, Daniel, I don't know how to do this carefully. I've been trying to figure out the careful version for about 2 months, and I don't think there is one. He read that twice. There isn't, he wrote back. That's been my experience. I have a daughter with a complicated medical history and a board with opinions about my personal life, and I haven't let anyone close in 4 years because closeness meant one more thing I could lose. She sent it, then immediately followed with, that's the honest version. I didn't edit it. I know, he wrote. I have a 6-year-old who carries his mother's photo in a notebook, and I move cities every year so nothing can take root. I told myself that was practical. It was mostly just fear. The cursor blinked on his screen. He waited. What do we do? She wrote. I don't know, he wrote back. I think we just said it out loud. Maybe that's where you start. A pause that felt different from the others, not hesitation, something settling, like a door already ajar opening another inch. Okay, she wrote. Okay, he wrote back. He put the phone down and sat in the kitchen another 20 minutes. What filled the room was uncertainty. He'd learned to distrust certainty. But it was solid in a way the last 4 years hadn't been, and he recognized it, from a long time ago, as the feeling of ground underfoot. January arrived cold enough that Denver felt like a personal decision the city was making about the people who lived there. The Riverside sessions continued. Renee expanded the Thursday program by 2 slots, citing demand, and the gym took on the crowded, productive noise of more kids in a smaller space. Which worked out fine, because kids, Renee always maintained, did better with witnesses than without them. Nora had progressed in ways Dr. Alvarez, her original therapist, described it. Their quarterly check-in as meaningfully exceeding our projected trajectory. The clinical way of saying what was happening was more than anyone had planned for. She could clear the full length of the parallel bars without stopping. She'd started work on a lightweight forearm crutch, which Renee had introduced with the same no-ceremony energy she brought to everything. Here's the next thing, let's see how it fits. She wasn't fast, and she wasn't steady in any way that looked dramatic from outside, but she was doing it every Thursday, every Tuesday, getting up when she went down, which she still did, regularly, though the going down itself had changed. She'd stopped bracing against it like a catastrophe and started treating it as information, the way Renee had taught Claire on the mat that first Friday, and the way Claire, without ever calling it a lesson, had modeled for her daughter just by showing up, falling, and coming back. The things we teach without meaning to. Daniel thought about this a lot. The invisible curriculum of parenthood, the things children absorb not from what you tell them but from what you do at 11 at night when you think they're asleep, or what your face does with unexpected news, or how long you stay on the floor before getting up. Sam had learned patience from watching Daniel fix things that took several tries. He'd learned that sadness was a room you could leave and come back to, not a place you lived, from the way Daniel handled the anniversary of Marisol's death each year, quietly, but not secretly, never as if the grief were something shameful. He'd learned that the people you love deserve the truest version of you, not the most composed one, from a conversation Daniel overheard him having with Nora on the gym mat in December, when she'd asked if he missed his mom. Yeah, Sam had said. Mostly, I miss having one. Like I miss the idea of it. My dad says that's okay. He says you can miss something you didn't really have enough of. Nora had been quiet a moment. I miss my dad like that too. I don't remember him very well, but I miss him all the time. My dad says grief is just love with nowhere to go, Sam said. So you have to find somewhere to put it. Daniel had stood very still at the equipment rack, listening to his 6-year-old hand back to another child, something Daniel had said once, quietly, 2 years earlier, when Sam asked why missing someone felt so heavy. He hadn't known Sam had kept it. Hadn't known it mattered enough to keep. You never know which words are the ones that stay. Riverside Spring Showing was held the second Saturday of March. Renee rejected the word recital on principle. Recital implied a polish that had no business being applied to kids still learning how their own bodies worked. She called it a showing. Come and see what we've been doing, her invitation read, mailed 3 weeks ahead in the plain, no-frills format she applied to everything. It won't be perfect. It will be real. The gym was set with folding chairs facing the cleared floor, maybe 60 people, parents, siblings, a few grandparents, and Mrs. Alana's from across the hall, who Daniel had mentioned it to and who'd shown up at his door that morning in her good coat asking what time they were leaving. He'd driven her. She'd sat with her hands folded, told him plainly that Marisol would have liked this version of his life, and he'd driven 3 more blocks before he trusted himself to answer. Yeah, he'd said. I think she would. Mrs. Alanas had nodded, looked out the window, and asked if there'd be coffee. There had been coffee. Claire staked out the front row early. Daniel sat 2 seats down with Sam between them, Sam's own specific choice, walked into deliberately, as if he'd sketched the seating chart in his notebook the night before and was now executing it. Mrs. Alanas sat on Daniel's other side and immediately struck up a conversation about parking with the grandmother next to her. The program ran 50 minutes, 12 kids, each with a short individual piece, then a group sequence Renee had choreographed over 6 weeks, built entirely around what each child could do rather than what the form demanded. Malik landed a controlled spin on his prosthetic he'd been working on since November. Ellie moved through her routine with the halting, deliberate quality her condition required, and somehow made it look, against all logic, like intention rather than limitation. A new kid, 10-year-old Owen, who joined in January after a sports injury, got through his piece without stopping, which was the whole of what he'd set out to do, and grinned so hard afterward that his grandmother in the third row started crying. Nora went last. She'd asked to be last, and Renee had agreed without making anything of it, just wrote her name at the bottom of the list and moved on. Daniel noticed and understood what it meant. That Nora wanted the full weight of the room behind her, and wanted nothing coming after that she'd have to make space for. She'd been thinking it through since January, probably, the way she thought through things that mattered, quietly, completely alone. The music Renee had found was slow instrumental piano, with enough space in it to hold whatever pace Nora needed. No words. Just the music, and what she chose to do with it. She came out from the edge of the floor with the forearm crutch in her right hand. What Nora did that afternoon, and what Claire did watching her, and what passed silently between Claire and Daniel in the seats afterward, became one more thread in something that had stopped being a strange accident and had started, slowly and without anyone declaring it, to become a life shared between two families who'd found each other through loss. At the reception after, in a corner booth of the diner 2 blocks from Riverside where they'd started ending Thursdays together, Sam explained his graphic novel to Nora with total, committed generosity, the way, Daniel thought, watching him, that Marisol had once explained things, as if giving were simply what you did. Claire asked Daniel, carefully, if it would be all right if he would allow it for the foundation they'd begun quietly discussing to carry Marisol's name. The word allow landed strangely, not because it was wrong, but because of the way Claire put on it, the real understanding that it was his to give or withhold, not hers to take. He sat with it a moment. Marisol had spent her professional life making sure medical resources reached the places that needed them, had walked into a situation she knew carried risk because she decided the work was worth it, had left behind a son who carried her photograph everywhere and had somehow, without remembering her face, absorbed the exact quality of her warmth. Was right now in a booth explaining a graphic novel to a girl in a wheelchair with the total generosity of someone who gives because giving is just what you do. Yeah, Daniel said. I'd allow that. Claire nodded once and didn't make more of it than it was. He appreciated that too. What followed over the next months wasn't a transformation in the cinematic sense, no montage, no sudden arrival at a better life. It was slower and messier and more ordinary than that, which is the only way real things ever happen. Daniel gave Frank 3 weeks' notice, which Frank accepted with genuine regret and a handshake that lasted a beat longer than handshakes usually do. He spent those 3 weeks training his replacement on the standards he'd kept at the Sovereign, the marble floors, the rhythm of the service schedule, the way to manage an overnight event turnover without leaving a seam showing. He did it carefully, because the work had been real even while it was hiding him, and he didn't know how to do anything halfway. He started at the foundation in April. The formal structure was still being built, Claire's legal team, Renee's requirements, the unglamorous machinery of non-profit formation, but the actual work started before the paperwork finished, because that's how real things work. He and Renee met twice a week to translate what she'd built at Riverside into something teachable to other instructors, which was harder than it sounded, because the most important things Renee did were things she did instinctively and had never had to put into words. They spent 3 sessions just trying to articulate what letting them lead meant in practice. What it looked like in the body, what the instructor's actual role was in the moment a child was about to fall, when every instinct says catch them. It's not catching, and it's not abandoning, Renee said at the whiteboard in Riverside's back office. It's staying close enough that they know you're there, but not so close they can't feel the space between you. That's not a curriculum note, Daniel said. That's a philosophy. Then write it down as a philosophy, Renee said, and build the curriculum around it. He wrote it down. Sam finished his graphic novel in May, 43 pages, hand-drawn in pencil on good paper Claire had bought him after he'd mentioned once that he kept running out. It had shown up at their apartment door in a box with no ceremony, no acknowledgement expected, the way Claire did things when she wanted to do them without making Daniel feel managed by them. He'd registered the box, registered what it meant, and said nothing, because some things work best as a quiet understanding between two people still learning to receive things gracefully. The dedication, in Sam's careful block letters, read, "For Nora, who taught me about being still." For my dad, who taught me about showing up. And for my mom, who I'm going to find out more about when I'm older. Daniel read it twice alone in the kitchen after Sam was in bed, sat with it a while, then texted Claire a photo of the page. She wrote back a single line, "He is the best thing." Yeah, Daniel wrote. He really is. The Marisol Heart Foundation held its first program in September, not in Denver, but in Cleveland, where the need was documented and a rec center had offered its space, and 3 of Renee's newly trained instructors were ready. The launch wasn't attended by press, which was Claire's decision and one she made without regret. There had been enough press. Enough of the story told in the language of spectacle. What the foundation was going to be wasn't spectacle. It was going to be a Tuesday morning in a gym in Cleveland where a kid who'd been told what he couldn't do would fall on a mat, get back up, and find out the room was still there, unchanged, still holding, and that the falling hadn't ended anything. That was the whole of it. That was enough. Daniel was there for the first day, watching from the back of the gym as Renee's lead instructor, a woman named Monica who'd spent 3 months in training and had the particular quality of attention that told you she'd actually understood what she was taught, ran the warm-up with 9 kids who didn't know each other yet and were sizing each other up with the complicated social math of children in a new situation. By the end of the hour, 2 of them were arguing cheerfully about the right way to do a transfer. A girl in the back had helped a boy she'd never met find his balance on the rail without being asked. Someone fell, and someone else said, without thinking about it, "You good?" and the kid on the floor said, "Yeah," and got up, and they both moved on. It was, in every measurable sense, ordinary. Daniel drove back to Denver that afternoon. Claire met him at Riverside for the Thursday session. She still came to everyone she could. She'd missed 3 all year for travel, and rescheduled the travel twice to avoid a 4th. Afterward, they stood in the alley in the cool September air that carried the first edge of fall, Nora and Sam ahead of them heading for the cars, Nora on her crutch, Sam beside her, matching her pace with the unconscious consideration he'd built up over months of walking near her, while Daniel and Claire walked behind, close enough that their arms nearly touched. "How was Cleveland?" she asked. "Good," he said. "Real." She nodded. She knew what he meant by that word by now. She'd been in enough rooms with him to know his vocabulary, and what it stood in for. Ahead of them, Sam said something that made Nora laugh, the real one, the unguarded one that happens before you decide something's funny. Daniel watched his son's face afterward. The quiet satisfaction of someone who's made a person they care about laugh, doing his best not to look like he knows it worked. "I talked to Dr. Alvarez this week," Claire said. She used the word exceptional again. She'd like to write about Nora's progress for a medical journal. She asked permission. "What did you say?" "That I'd ask Nora." She looked at him. Nora said yes. Said if it helps another doctor help another kid, why would she say no? A pause. "She's 8. 9 next month," Daniel said. "And she's already thinking about a kid she's never met who might benefit from something she went through." Claire shook her head slightly, not dismissal, the opposite of it. Wonder, without the fear wrapped around it that used to come standard. There was no single moment when the 4 of them became a family. That isn't how families are made, not in Daniel's experience. They're made the way everything real is made. Incrementally, imperfectly, through the accumulation of ordinary choices, through showing up and staying, through the particular discipline of being present even when present is hard. Through Sam teaching Nora a breathing trick, in for 4, out for 8 on a Thursday mat, and Nora using it her own way and passing it to other kids at the center, who used it their own ways in turn. Through Claire learning to let a morning go wrong without correcting it back to plan. Through Daniel learning that letting someone in didn't mean holding less, that love wasn't always subtraction. Through Nora discovering that the people in her life weren't going to vanish the moment she needed them. Through Sam, who'd known from the start what the rest of them were still learning, carrying his mother's photograph in his notebook and drawing his family into the pages around it with the exact confidence of someone who knows what home looks like and is simply recording it. There was a Sunday in November, more than a year after the gala, when the 4 of them were in the apartment that had stopped being only Daniel and Sam's in the slow, undramatic way spaces change. Nora was on the couch, legs stretched out. Sam was on the floor with the second volume of his graphic novel. Daniel was in the kitchen making something that required more attention than he was giving it. Claire sat at the table with her laptop open, not working on whatever she'd opened it for. The apartment had the particular quality of a space holding people with nowhere else they needed to be. Sam looked up from his notebook, glanced at Nora, then at his father in the kitchen, then at Claire at the table, and said, to no one in particular, "This is my favorite." Nobody asked what he meant. They all knew. Daniel looked at him from the kitchen doorway. His son, 7 now, sitting on the floor of an apartment that had finally stopped feeling temporary, surrounded by people who'd arrived in their lives through grief and accident and the specific grace of a little girl who'd decided, one October night, that the person she wanted to dance with was the one nobody else was looking at. He thought about Marisol. Not the weight of what was lost, but the real, specific gratitude for what had been given, and what it had made possible, and the way her son carried her forward in everything he was. He thought about 43 pages with a dedication that said a boy was going to find out more about his mother when he was older, and how that wasn't tragedy, but promise. He thought about what it means to build something out of what you have left, and how the thing you build is never the same as the thing before it, and how that isn't a consolation but a truth, that different isn't lesser, that the rebuilt version has its own structural integrity, its own particular strength in the places where it was remade. He looked at Claire, who'd glanced up from the laptop and was watching Sam with an expression nothing like the controlled, managed face she'd worn at the gala a year before. She looked like someone who'd set down something very heavy and was still getting used to how light she felt without it. She felt him looking, glanced over. Neither of them said anything. Some things had gotten past the point of needing words. On the couch, Nora reached over and flicked Sam's notebook with one finger. "Read me what you wrote today." Sam looked up, plainly delighted to be asked. "Okay, but it's a long part." "I have time," Nora said. And she did. They all did. Time, the thing loss had taught every one of them not to take for granted. They had it, and they were using it, not saving it for some cleaner, simpler, more certain later. Right now, in this apartment, with the November dark outside the window and something burning slightly in the kitchen that Daniel moved to fix without drama, with one child reading aloud from a handmade book and another listening with her whole attention and 2 adults watching from their separate corners of a room that held all of it, right now wasn't a step toward something better. Right now was the thing itself.